We're in the sixth chapter of Gittin, of the rules of divorce, and we're learning about agency, the power of the wife to appoint an agent to accept the get, to accept the document of divorce, and the power of the husband to appoint an agent to write it and deliver it. We've already said that the classical language for the husband to use, and that's in the fifth Mishnah, the sixth chapter, is kitvu get utnu ishti. Write a get and give it to my wife. In other words, the agent has to be appointed both to write it and to give it. This is crucial. If he doesn't use this language, the get is invalid. And yet the Mishnah there made certain exceptions. It said, Barishana Hayu Omrim, originally they said, Hayotse Bakola, someone being led out to execution. And he says, Kitvu get liishti, write a get for my wife. So he doesn't want his wife to be an aguna. Maybe he doesn't want her to be subject to be an aguna if his death is not documented, or he doesn't want her to be subject to marrying his brother, her brother-in-law, if she doesn't want to do that. For whatever reason, he thinks that she would rather be a divorcee than a widow. So he says, Kivu get liishti, write a get for my wife. And he doesn't say give it to her. But the halakha is going to allow that to be sufficient. It's as if in extenuating circumstances, an abbreviated instruction to an agent is sufficient. And interestingly, when just reciting this halakha, kitvu get liishti, write a get for my wife, we're using the language in the classic printed text because Kaufman incomprehensibly has kitvu get utnu liishti, write a get and give it to my wife, and we can't understand any meaning in the Mishnah in this reading. So we're following the printed text here. And the Mishnah, we're now going to jump into the Mishnah of the sixth chapter. The Mishnah follows up these examples of effectively someone who's in extenuating circumstances, or who's perhaps in danger, or who's perhaps close to death, and who uses an abbreviated message of instruction to an agent. So the Mishnah begins, Mi shehaya mushlach levor ve'amar kol hashomea et kolo yichtov get liishto. Someone who's thrown into a pit. So it sounds like he's obviously been captured by bandits, he's in danger of life. This is not someone who just falls into a hole in the ground. And he shouts out, whoever hears his voice should write a get for his wife. He's referring to himself in a third person. He probably recites his name and his address and the name of his wife, of course, because these are still crucial for the get. So he recites this. He doesn't say to give it to his wife. He says should write for his wife. But that is considered sufficient. Hare elu yichtavu ve'yitnu. Those who hear should write and give. So the instruction to write is interpreted as an instruction to write and to give. But that only works for people who are sick. So the Mishnah goes on. If a healthy man says, Kitvu geit liishti, a healthy man who says, write a get for my wife, just wants to play around with her. In fact, the rabbis are going to completely disallow this activity because they don't want bills of divorce hanging around that haven't been delivered. We strongly, strongly discourage this kind of, I guess we would probably call it, emotional abuse in today's language. The rabbis don't call it emotional abuse, but it's not permitted. It's not permitted except under certain circumstances. And we're now going to read about an event of suicide. So someone who's not physically ill, but clearly he's mentally ill. Really interesting that the rabbis are recognizing and dealing with mental illness in the time of the Mishnah. Let's have a look at the example. So this healthy man said, write a get for my wife. So normally this would not be it would not be allowed, and certainly would not be of any validity. Ve'alal rosh hagag, and then he went up to the top of the roof. Ve'nafal umet, and he fell off and he died. Bit like taking out an insurance policy and then committing suicide. He gives instructions to write this get, and then he climbs to the very top of the roof and he falls off and dies. Amar Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel said, he says in the name of the sages, Amru Chachamim, he says, look, the sages said, Im me'atzmo nafal harei get. If he fell of his own account, i.e., if this is a suicide, then it's a get. Then his mind's clearly disturbed. He's on the point of death. We accept that's a get. Im haruach decha'ato, but if the wind pushed him over, ain't get. It's not a get. Someone who's in full possession of his mental and physical powers has to use the right language to appoint an agent. And the Mishnah then gives further details about this idea that the agent has to be fully appointed both to give and to write. Amar li Shnaim, he said to two people, so he appoints two people now, Tanu get li'ishti, give a get to my wife. Or he says to three people, Kitvu get utnu li'ishti, he write a get and give it to my wife. They must write it and they must give it. So even if he just says give, the assumption is, the implication is that they need to write it in order to give it. So saying write the get is not sufficient for a healthy person, but saying give the get, when there are two people involved, between them there are two witnesses, they can take ownership of this task, that is sufficient, and then they have to write it. And similarly, if he says to three people, write and give, they have to write it. But let's lighten up a bit. Let's lighten up. Amar li shlosha tnu get li'ishti. He says to three, give a get to my wife. He doesn't specify they have to write it, as in the first example. Yomru la'acharim ktovu. They can tell others to write. Why? He's made them into a court. Divrei Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Meir holds that this is a situation where it is not like a normal agent. A normal agent can't pass on his agency. But the three have the status of a bet din. So effectively, as a bet din, they can instruct a scribe to write the get. Of course, this is very important in a time when not everybody had the skill to write a get. This could be very important. The three of them can behave like a bet din. They can instruct someone to write the get, and then they will give the get to the wife. And we're going to prove this from the halacha. Zo halacha shalach Hanania ish ono mi beta asurin. And this is the halacha which Rabbi Hanania, the man of Ono, maybe this is Kiryat Ono, brought from prison. There is an idea in the Gemara that in fact he brought it from Rabbi Akiva in prison. So Rabbi Akiva is in prison and he's still teaching Torah in prison, and he sends this halacha back to the sages. What's the halacha? Mukubal ani be'omer li shlosha. I have a tradition about someone who says to three people, Tanu get li shti, give a get to my wife, sheyomru la'acherim ktovu, that they can tell others to write it. Mipnei she'asa'an bet din, because he's made them into a court. So according to Rabbi Akiva, three people, when they receive this instruction, they're a bet din. They can instruct a scribe to write the get, and then they will hand it over. And Rabbi Yossi is going to disagree. Amar Rabbi Yossi, Amar Rabbi Yossi, he's going to disagree. Numinu la shaliach. We sent a message. We told the shaliach. Amar Rabbi Yossi, numinu la shaliach. We told the shaliach. We don't agree here. Af anu mekubalin. We too have a tradition. She'afilu amar b'veit din hagadol b'Yerushalayim tnu get leishti she'ilmadu v'yichtavu v'yitnu la. Even if he appoints the great court in Jerusalem, so I'm not even talking about three regular guys, even if he goes to the Bet Din in Jerusalem, the highest court in the land, the Supreme Court, and he says, give my wife a get, that means they have to write it. They have to write it. They have to learn. If they don't know how to write the get, these are these are the Supreme Court justices. If they don't know how to write a get, they have to take time out from their work as justices to learn to write the get, and then they have to write it, and then they have to give it, because this kind of agency cannot be passed on, cannot be if you like, given at second hand. What if he said to 10 people? What if he actually said to a group, Amar la asara, tnuget ishti. So he says to 10 people. Well, we're already sensing that they're going to have to write the get. He says, the halacha seems to be, according to Rabbi Yossi, he tells them to give a get to his wife, they have to write it. But do all of them have to write it? The Mishnah goes on to say, Echad kotevu shnaim chotmim. One writes it and two sign it. So between them, they have to provide the two witnesses and the scribe, but they don't all need to participate, not all 10. If he says, on the other hand, kulchem tofu, if he says, all of you write, echad kotev echulam chotmim, one would write out the text of the get, but all of them would sign. So all of them would put pen in some way to parchment to sign off this get. But they don't all have to write the whole text. It's sufficient if they all sign. And this is quite a dangerous thing to do. I mean, what if one of the 10 died before the woman was divorced? Lefichach imet echad mehem harei get batel. If one of them died, obviously this is before the woman is divorced. If one of them dies, the get is invalid because he said, all of you 10 have to sign. He's made the get conditional on the 10 signatures. It's a dangerous thing to do because if one of them cannot sign for any reason, maybe death or maybe some other reason, then the get will be invalid.